To solve a nonlinear system of equations by substitution. The first problem is x plus y equals 7 and x squared minus 2y equals 11. Your first move is to figure out which equation can you easily isolate one of the variables. You could isolate any one of those variables in either one, but there are some that are easier than others. And on the top equation, I think it would be easiest to isolate the y. X plus y equals 7, and if we isolate the y, we're left with negative x plus 7. That means we can put it in for y in the other equation. If you isolate x in the first equation, you're going to be plugging something in for x squared, and you have to end up doing more work by squaring a binomial, which would give you a trinomial expression. So in this case, we have negative x plus 7, and we can put it in for y here. So when we do that, we have x squared minus 2 times a negative x plus 7, and then equals 11. Simplify by getting rid of the parentheses. X squared and then minus 2x times a negative x is plus 2x. And negative 2 times 7 is minus 14. Remember, you must get this into the quadratic form of ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And if you'll notice, we already have x squared plus 2x minus 14 on the left, but we need to move that 11 over with it and make it minus 11. So x squared plus 2x, and then you're going to end up with minus 14 minus 11, which is a minus 25. And set that equal to 0. From here, we have to figure out what's the best way to solve this quadratic equation. Should it be completing the square, quadratic formula, factoring? The factors of 25 are 1 and 25 and 5 and 5, and in no way can you get a positive 2 out of adding any of those factors together. So we can try this, the quadratic formula, to get negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 2. And we'll have minus 4 times 1 times a negative 25. And on the bottom we'll have 2 times 1. So negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 plus 100 is 104. And then on the bottom is 2. So we have to do this twice. We have to do this once with a plus, once with a minus. So negative 2 plus the square root of 104 over 2, and negative 2 minus the square root of 104 over 2. So in your calculator, you're going to do negative 2 and then minus the square root of 104 equals, and then divide by 2. So we need to do negative 2 plus the square root of 104 and then divide by 2 to come up with 4.1. And then on the other side, negative 2 minus the square root of 104 divided by 2 is a negative 6.1. Those are your two solutions that you must take back to the beginning of the problem so that you can figure out what the value of y is. Now we'll set the rule now that you're going to round to the 10th place here and here whenever this situation arises where the number under the radical sign is not a perfect square. So we'll go back to the top with our two answers and take a look at x plus y equals 7. So x plus y equals 7, and we're putting in 4.1. 4.1 plus y equals 7, so that's easy enough to solve. You're just going to add 2.9 to 4.1 to get 7. We put in a 4.1 and we're getting back a 2.9. So there's one set of answers. And then again we have to do x plus y equals 7. And we're going to put in a negative 6.1. plus y equals 7. Just add 6.1 to the right and you're going to come up with 13.1. So we're going to have an input of negative 6.1 and an output of 13.1. Your first move on this problem is to figure out what can you isolate and get by itself easily. You could try the first equation or the second equation, but I'm going to try this one down here. So 2x squared minus 2y equals 0. I'm going to leave negative 2y on the left and put negative 2x squared on the right, and then divide both sides by negative 2 to be left with y equals x squared. So with that, I can go up to here and put in x squared in place of y in the top equation to get 2x minus 3x squared equals negative 8. And then give it a try at putting it in a quadratic equation form. So we already have a negative 3x squared on the left and a plus 2x. We now need that minus 8 to go to the left and become plus 8. We can try the quadratic formula to come up with negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 2 squared minus 4 times negative 3 times 8. And 2 times a negative 3. Now we'll go back and simplify. Have a negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 plus 8 times 3 is 24, 24 times 4 is 96. On the bottom we have a negative 6. So negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 100 over negative 6 is going to break up into two problems. Negative 2 plus 10 over negative 6 and negative 2 minus 10 over negative 6. On the first part, you'll have an 8 over a negative 6, and then on the right side you'll have a negative 12 over 2. So we're left with a negative 4/3, or not a negative 12 over 2, but actually a negative 12 over negative 6. And that'll leave you with 2. So you have negative 4/3 or a positive 2 for your two answers. And you can come back to the top and plug those in into one or both of those equations. We're going to use the first one up there, 2x minus 3y equals a negative 8. And we found a negative 4/3 and a positive 2. So we're going to put in a negative 4/3 to start with. 2 times a negative 4/3 minus 3y equals negative 8. That's a negative 8/3 minus 3y equals negative 8. And let's keep this negative 3y where it's at and the negative 8 and make it plus 8 over 3 on the right. A common denominator of 3 will help us to simplify that. A negative 24 over 3 plus 8 over 3 is going to give us a negative 16 over 3. If we divide a negative 16 over 3 by a negative 3, it's the same thing as multiplying by 1 over 3. And the negative signs will cancel out. So you'll have 16 over 9, which will reduce down to, or you can simplify down to 1 7/9. So we've put in what essentially was a negative 1 1/3 and got back a 1 7/9 for the first part. Now we have to plug in the positive 2. So remember it was 2x minus 3y equals negative 8. 2x minus 3y equals negative 8. And we're plugging in a positive 2. So that's going to be 4 minus 3y equals a negative 8. we should have a negative 3y equals a negative 8 minus 4, and a negative 3y equals a negative 12. Y equals negative 12 divided by 3. So we'll come back with y equals a positive 4. We put in a positive 2 and came back with 4. And remember, the other answer was negative 1 1/3 and 1 7/9.